everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have a transit of Pluto in your 12th house. This is going to be quite a doozy because if you think about what Pluto represents and what the 12th house represents, you can imagine the kind of influence this will yield. The 12th house is a house of karma. It's the house of past lives, the house of the spiritual dimensions. It's the house of solitude, so the Hermits House, spiritual contemplation, retreat, spiritual studying. But also the house of prisons and hospitals. This is the house of suffering, so I'm sure those two institutions would be, connected to that in one way or the other. And it's a house of self-undoing. So what do we do that gets in our own way? So because Neptune rules the 12th house in the sign of Pisces, we're talking about addiction, but also illusion. Neptune can be about escapism, and that can come in the form of addiction, but also in other escapist behaviors like kind of like immersing oneself in fantasy, like, watching TV or movies a lot, or addictions being beyond substance abuse, being addicted to a relationship, pornography, food, the internet. So what does Pluto do? Pluto is looking at the inner motivations of things. It's like the psychologist, but it has this quality of the excavator. So it's looking beneath the surface, it's digging, and it's trying to uncover the hidden motivations of things. So when you have Pluto in your 12th house, you can expect that all of those things that you may do to avoid your pain may be totally exposed, but not necessarily by someone else, but by yourself, because this house is really about you going within very, very deeply. That's why it is the Hermit's house, because that's the motivation of someone who is seeking solitude for their spiritual growth. They're trying to, tune out the noise of the world. And so this can be something that is very transformative for you, because that is one of the key words of Pluto, is it wants to transform the person. So if you're someone who considers yourself an atheist, although I don't know how many atheists are into astrology, but there might be a few, and or just somebody that has been kind of lukewarm about spiritual matters because maybe you were raised in a very punitive or fear-based organized religion, and so that just kind of made you reject all of it, or just you might be kind of sort of interested, but you never really kind of like an agnostic, where you didn't totally reject it, but you didn't really embrace it. This might be the time when you do so. And by the way, speaking of time, I mean for this to be like a timeless video, but while I am recording this, Pluto has recently gone retrograde back into Capricorn, but is set to go back into Aquarius, where it will stay for 20 years. It will retrograde back into Capricorn once again in 2024. I'm recording this in 2023. So I think I'm pretty safe that it's going to be 20 years is a long time, for a transit. So if you have at least part of Aquarius as your 12th house, then this video is for you because you're going to experience this. And that's another thing that I wanted to say is that because Pluto has such a long transit, we call it a generational planet because of this, not everyone will have Pluto transiting their 12th house. So you should feel quite honored because for some reason you chose, I think at least, to experience such an intense transit in your lifetime. There might have been some very important reason that you had to do this. This is a water house, which means that emotions can be front and center in terms of what it is that you're trying to transform. The 12th house can be the area of deeply buried emotions. I would say unconscious emotions. Some people say subconscious. Well, there's a fine line. I think because this is the house that deals with karma and therefore past lives, that a lot of us have amnesia about our past lives. So they would be considered unconscious memories. So as a result, we have it's not like slight recall. If I think of the 8th house that Scorpio rules as more of the subconscious, and the 4th house can be totally conscious, your childhood that you are perfectly aware of. But I think of the 8th house as more sublimated because of trauma, but not totally forgotten. The 12th house, maybe it is from extreme trauma, so repressed memories, completely. Pluto may bring these out. So if you experience extreme trauma, yes, maybe this will occur for you. And because this is the house of Neptune, and Neptune can be drugs, there may be the desire for some of you to excavate these traumas, these memories that you have repressed through plant medicine, such as ayahuasca. I think that's how you say it, which is something that I have, watched other people's videos on their experiences with it and read about it. It's very interesting, and people have unearthed these repressed memories. I know in one particular case where the person did, and sometimes that might serve as a confirmation that something occurred. Maybe they suspected it, but they weren't sure. And I just want to say before I continue that I have never done anything like that, taken anything like that. So I am definitely not suggesting that anyone should do that. Just because it's something that is really trendy right now, please, if you feel that urge, I'm not saying that you should kind of talk yourself out of it, but do a lot of research because there are some things that I have heard that it's not like just this completely perfect result, because sometimes there might be energetic attachments that result, and that can be true anytime somebody takes some kind of mind-altering substance. is that it opens them up for that kind of thing. So, you know, be very well informed before you go into something like that. But I did want to bring that up because I think that these things are occurring because people feel like they want to heal. They're tired of holding on to this baggage and they feel like that's one way to do it. Of course, there are other ways of doing it, such as hypnotic regression. And with the 12th house, I think it would especially be past lives. I would even say do your research on that, because my own point of view on all of this is that there is a reason why we repress memories from this lifetime and why we come into this lifetime with amnesia from other lifetimes. And I realize that some people do have past life recall as well. So it's not across the board. But I think there's a reason for it. When you repress a memory in this lifetime, there's actually a protective measure that is happening where it's trying to protect you against something that is too difficult for you to understand. It's too overwhelming. It would kind of like blow out your circuits or whatever. So that's why I think we have to approach such a thing with, very gently, and not just be like, okay, I want to do that. And Pluto, I don't know if Pluto is that gentle. However, since this is a period of years, it might be a very gradual kind of a thing. And if you can approach this very carefully, then maybe you will be able to deal with what is uncovered. Because remember, it's almost like opening Pandora's box. You are like, I want to know what happened because I feel like I'm being controlled by these memories that I don't even know what they are. And that it affects you very deeply, but it's like, what is it? And when you discover what it is, you have to be able to integrate that information. And this, again, with plant medicine, is if they are just telling you the truth and you're biting from that apple of knowledge, then what do you do with that? So you have to have a game plan on how you're going to move forward, and maybe some kind of person in place to act as a therapist or other type of healer, so that if you are upset by what has been unearthed, you can integrate it as soon as possible instead of re-traumatizing yourself. So that's all. I don't think that, maybe I'm a little bit on the cautious side, but I think there's always, room to proceed very carefully with these kinds of things, especially the 12th house. So I was thinking about power struggles when it comes to Pluto. Wherever Pluto lands in your chart at a specific time, that those power struggles can come about. In the 12th house, this is really difficult because this is the house of hidden enemies. So how do you fight a battle with people that you don't even know exist? Well, the interesting thing about this is that even with, for instance, when they talk about demonic possession and all of these things that sometimes people experience, if I'm not mistaken, there's this school of thought that at a higher level, this is a part of us. This is kind of like externalizing, even though it's like on the spiritual level, something that is within ourselves. So ultimately, all these things can go away when we have gotten to a higher level. And so when you think about enemies, for instance, hidden enemies, and they may actually exist in the physical world, but why do people attract these people into their life? Or are they just there regardless? Well, if we look at the 12th house as the house of karma, this means that we have dealt with people in many lifetimes that we still haven't resolved something with, possibly. That's how I would look at it. And these people will vex us until we step into our power, which is the theme of Pluto. Not power struggles, though. See, when you have a power struggle with someone, it means that you are not empowered. It means that you feel like that other person has the power and you have to kind of wrestle with them for that power. When you are deeply self-empowered, there is no outer struggle. Even if you were working temporarily, probably, for someone else, and you had a boss who was very controlling, you might choose to just submit, and all the while you would be either starting your own business on the side, sending resumes out. You wouldn't necessarily be fighting for control because you would assess the situation. And if you saw that person, that was part of who they were, because they don't understand themselves and they have that need to control people, and that's why they're in the position that they're in. The late Wayne Dyer called them petty tyrants. You wouldn't even waste your energy on somebody like that because you're just about self-empowerment. So you might even use that as a springboard for starting your own business, because perhaps you had experienced this in multiple places and you finally realized, the chances are pretty good that if I work for somebody else, this is the kind of person I'm going to encounter. Maybe not 100% of the time, but I'm really somebody that wants to call my own shots. So I'm going to do this. But sometimes people go from one job to the next and they're always fighting with authority figures. And they're doing so not because they really are empowered, but because, the 10th house can be like the father. That's the first authority figure in some households. Or we can just say the parent who had the main, the main disciplinarian. And we could be fighting that person our whole lives if we never really connect the dots and project that anger on being controlled by that parent onto a boss. Not to say that boss is not overstepping their boundaries. It could be true as well. But attracting those situations where that's more likely to occur, perhaps. And of course, relationships, where you can have power struggles in relationships. So because of the nature of the 12th house, this brings it back to yourself. Like, what do I do? What are my self-destructive tendencies that create these situations at a deeper level? Like, for instance, with relationships. Do I do something at the beginning of the relationship that makes it more likely that I'm going to, submit to the will of somebody else? Maybe I get too involved too quickly. And then I feel that emotional attachment too early on, and I don't want to leave when I know that I should. if you have some addiction that you're battling, this will really, make you aware of it, and also probably make you aware of the origins of it. In some cases, you may need to seek out a therapist to help you to figure out where it's coming from if you just cannot understand why you have this. And when I say a therapist, obviously not all therapists are created equally. So I'm not, particularly aware of this, how many therapists have a spiritual background. That would be ideal. And one that kind of like jibes with yours, where, maybe they see the world in a similar way, and they see their spiritual path in a similar way as yours, so they can help you the best into how to transform yourself by understanding, the root cause of something, but also the need for the spiritual to be part of your life. Because when the Pluto transit is in this 12th house, that is probably how you're going to transform yourself, is through your spiritual practice. And of course, that could mean that you have some other kind of person to guide you, like a spiritual teacher. But the reason I mentioned a therapist is that it might be more than one. The 12th house is kind of similar. I have read a lot of information that suggests that the 12th house can be part of the psyche, just like the 8th house. But to me, it bothers me when they mention multiple houses for some of those themes, because I like to keep everything very nice and neat. But yeah, so there are different areas of healing that you may require, and that's why I said you may need, I would call it a mentor, or someone, a guide. That's the best word, a guide, to help you in these different areas. So maybe you have a psychological guide, maybe you have a spiritual guide, and they are helping you in different sort of ways. But just somebody that you feel aligned to, called to, and maybe somebody who focuses on self-growth, because this transformation, if you are young enough now that you can have this transit and then still have a transit of Pluto in your first house, wow, how powerful are you going to emerge after that 12th house transit? If you have ever had a fear of death for whatever reason, having this transit, I feel, could be very beneficial for you, because you can transform it. Maybe you realize in one way or the other. There are many ways, whether it's through a psychedelic experience, through a mystical experience, just a spontaneous mystical experience, that you are an eternal being, that you are able to feel liberated in some way, because it was holding you back. That's one of those repressed memories that might have been really true for you. I'm trying to think. Sometimes it's a little tricky. Oh, well, I wonder, I guess, like, because the unequal house system, you might have a little bit of, maybe you have like a lot of Capricorn here in Pluto. So if you're really on the young side, and you have Pluto in the 12th house, you could experience you're coming into this world with Pluto in this house and then having it go into a new sign. But I was really talking about some people have Pluto close to the ascendant, but from the 12th house, and they have this experience of almost dying before they're born in the womb, or coming out, because you could say the 12th house being the womb. So that's not really what I was going for. But yeah, I mean, any kind of like, even like a past life trauma that deals with some sort of, death that was very unexpected or very traumatic that the person lived through, and they fear that happening again. And it kind of like keeps them from living, doing anything, because they're the 12th house can be these phobias, you know, and so these things can hold people back sometimes a lot, depending on what they are, and kind of really narrow their world so much that they don't do much of anything. So that's what we're trying to liberate, and this can do that. Deeply transform the psyche, the understanding of, becoming more empowered over those hidden influences. And maybe just completely, cleaning them out so that you're not burdened by them. Okay, well, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.